August 11th, 2025. President Donald J. Trump's big announcement today at his press conference, to which he showed up late, was that he is assuming control over the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department and deploying more than 100 agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and about 40 from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, along with officers from the Secret Service and the U.S. Marshal Service and members of the District of Columbia National Guard, to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. He reiterated that officers would clear homeless encampments from the city. In fact, statistics from the Department of Justice show that violent crime in the nation's capital was at a 30-year low in 2024, and, according to Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton, a Democrat from D.C., is down 26% this year compared to the same period last year. Former Undersecretary of State and editor of Time magazine Richard Stengel noted that Washington is not even in the top 10 dangerous cities in the U.S. Meanwhile, legal analyst Asha Rangappa notes that FBI agents are not trained to patrol the streets and that every one of them assigned to do that is not investigating foreign spies, foreign and domestic terrorists, or crimes like fraud, murder, corruption, and human trafficking. If that was Trump's big announcement, the big story seems to have been something different. Trump's performance at the press conference, an event for which his handlers would have made sure he was at the top of his game, made it clear that his mental deterioration is moving rapidly. He let Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and FBI Director Kash Patel explain the actual plan, taking the microphone himself to describe a fake world in which he plays the role of hero, solving 5 wars, creating a booming economy, solving the border security others couldn't, protecting Americans from a hellscape that exists only in his rhetoric. The administration's seizure of power is anything but imaginary. As Stengel noted, throughout history, autocrats use a false pretext to impose government control over local law enforcement as a prelude to a more national takeover. That's far more dangerous than the situation he says he is fixing. While Trump is mobilizing the National Guard under a pretext now, he memorably refused to mobilize it on January 6, 2021, to protect the lawmakers under siege in the U.S. Capitol as his supporters tried to stop the counting of the electoral votes that would make Democrat Joe Biden president. Some clues to what the administration is attempting showed up today in a court in California, where Governor Gavin Newsom and California Attorney General Rob Bonta are suing the Department of Justice, saying it broke the law by deploying about 4,000 troops from the National Guard and 700 U.S. Marines to Los Angeles in June without authorization. A federal law known as the Posse Comitatus Act prohibits federal troops from acting as law enforcement officers. Anna Bauer of Lawfare Media was following the events in court today. She posted that the government agreed the troops in Los Angeles were subject to the Posse Comitatus Act and that they were put in place simply to guard federal buildings and law enforcement officials. But witnesses said that troops accompanied ICE when they made arrests, and one of the documents introduced that related to the massive troop presence in MacArthur Park on July 7th said the purpose of the mission was to protect the execution of joint federal law enforcement missions while preserving public safety and demonstrating federal reach and presence. The words demonstrating federal reach and presence seem to get to the heart of the administration's object, for it is showing federal troops exercising power over civilians, even while telling the court they are not. Making people fear the government is key to the rise of an authoritarian. This mobilization echoes Trump's attempt to take over Washington, D.C. in June 2020, when he was angry about the protests over the death of George Floyd, murdered in May 2020 by white police officer Derek Chauvin, who knelt on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes. In 2020, members of Trump's first administration stopped him from using the military against U.S. citizens, and, dramatically, members of the military stepped up to declare their support not for a president, but for the United States Constitution. This time around, Trump has installed loyalist Pete Hegseth at the head of the military. Hegseth made his support for the president's plan clear today as he stood with Trump at the press conference. Ominously for civil liberties, observers note that no one from the administration is specifying where the administration intends to send people from the homeless encampments. Although Trump wrote Sunday, "We will give you places to stay, but far from the Capitol." The administration is also consolidating power over the economy. Greg Ip of the Wall Street Journal noted today that the U.S. is marching toward a form of state capitalism, in which Trump looks much like the Chinese Communist Party, exercising political control not just over government agencies, but over companies themselves. A generation ago, conventional wisdom held that as China liberalized, its economy would come to resemble America's, Ip wrote. Instead, capitalism in America is starting to look like China. Ip points to the government's partial control over U.S. steel that it took as a condition for Nippon Steel's takeover, the $1.5 trillion of promised investment from trading partners that Trump has claimed the right to direct personally, the 15% of certain chip sales of NVIDIA and advanced micro devices to China that will go to the administration, although who or what entity will get that money I can't figure out, and Trump's demand that the chief executive of Intel resign. Ip calls this system of state capitalism a hybrid between socialism and capitalism in which the state guides the decisions of nominally private enterprises. He notes that it is a sea change from the free market ethos the U.S. once embodied. Ip also notes that state capitalism is a means of political control, using the power of the state to crush political challenges. In Trump's first term, CEOs routinely spoke out when they disagreed with his policies, such as on immigration and trade, Ip writes. Now they shower him with donations and praise, or are mostly silent. Ip pointed out that Trump is deploying financial power and regulatory power to cow media companies, banks, law firms, and government agencies he thinks are not sufficiently supportive. But Trump's press conference did not show a president in control of these dramatic changes. His words echoed the rhetoric he used to win office in 2016, rhetoric he summed up in his inaugural address that turned a speech usually designed to be uplifting into a description of what he called American carnage. Mothers and children trapped in poverty in our inner cities, rusted out factories scattered like tombstones across the landscape of our nation, an education system flush with cash, but which leaves our young and beautiful students deprived of all knowledge, and the crime and the gangs and the drugs that have stolen too many lives and robbed our country of so much unrealized potential. But in the context of the president's rambling nonsense, that apocalyptic rhetoric, along with Trump's focus on renovating and redecorating the White House to look like one of his gold-splattered properties, seems like an attempt to return to a past in which he felt powerful. Meanwhile, Trump's second presidency has been following the plan outlined in Project 2025 closely, even though Trump denied any association with Project 2025 when he ran for office. Russell Vought, now director of the Office of Management and Budget, wrote the section of the plan that called for an extraordinarily strong executive in order to put in place Christian nationalism. Increasingly, it looks like members of his administration are using Trump in order to create a system that will respond to whoever is in charge, making it possible for today's leaders to retain control over the country even without Trump there to mobilize MAGA voters. Trump's press conference today showed a badly weakened president. His apparent connections to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein have already weakened him with his base. That story is not going away, and Trump has made it clear he is frantic over it. Then, today, he indicated even he is worried about his mental deterioration. At 7:36 this morning, he posted on social media that Representatives Jasmine Crockett, a Democrat of Texas, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a Democrat of New York, are morons. He wrote, "Each of these political hacks should be forced to take a cognitive exam, much like the one I recently took while getting my physical at our great Washington, D.C. military hospital, Walter Reed. As the doctors said, President Trump aced it, something that is rarely seen. These radical left lunatics would all fail this test in a spectacular show of stupidity and incompetence. Take the test." Vice President J.D. Vance appears to have been distancing himself from Trump and the administration by taking repeated vacations. As Bill Kristol noted today in The Bulwark, Vance also appears to be undercutting Trump over the Epstein files, twisting the knife while also seeming to make overtures to Trump's MAGA voters, who have never warmed to Vance. As Kristol notes, Vance set up what Kristol calls a very unusual meeting at his residence to discuss Epstein, a meeting that just happened to leak to the press. Then, yesterday, Vance brought up the issue again in an interview with Maria Bartiromo on the Fox News channel, parroting MAGA beliefs that the files name prominent Democrats. "A lot of Americans want answers. I certainly want answers," Vance told Bartiromo. As Kristol notes, with this bland statement, Vance succeeded, inadvertently needless to say, in reminding us that we don't yet have the answers we want and deserve, thus ginning up the Epstein story again. Those cheering on Trump's drive for autocratic power because they still somehow think he will use that power to make their lives better might want to consider how their lives may change if that power is in the hands of J.D. Vance. And so we have come full circle. The arbitrary nature of autocrats was, after all, what made our nation's founders base a government not on men, but on impartial laws that defended the rights and liberties of the people.
Letters from an American was written and read by Heather Cox Richardson. It was produced at Soundscape Productions, Dedham, Massachusetts. Recorded with music composed by Michael Moss.